A factory that built cars for 120 years just went silent. The company that owns it just posted the worst loss any car maker has ever recorded, and hidden inside hundreds of thousands of British cars sits an engine that was quietly built to fail. If you drive a Vauxhall, a Peugeot, a Citroën, or a DS, one of these three stories is already on your driveway. Stick around, because you're about to find out which one. The company behind the £20 billion collapse. The company behind all of this rarely gets named, and that's by design. It's called Stellantis, and it owns 14 brands, among them Vauxhall, Peugeot, Citroën, Fiat, Alfa Romeo, Jeep, Chrysler, Maserati, Lancia, and DS. Some over a century old, all under one holding company registered in Amsterdam. On the 26th of February this year, that company opened its books for 2025. What came out was a net loss of €22.3 billion, just over £20 billion at today's rate. The year before, this same company banked $5.5 billion in profit. That's not a slide. That's a cliff edge. So where did the money go? Almost none of it was spent. It was written off. Stellantis logged €25.4 billion in charges, $22 billion of that in the second half alone, most of it the value of its electric vehicle program being erased from the balance sheet. Factories built, batteries secured, an entire generation of EVs engineered around buyers who weren't coming fast enough. The company had to admit a huge chunk of what it built was worth a fraction of what it claimed. Even the chief executive didn't dress it up. The numbers, he said, reflect the price of overestimating how quickly the energy transition would happen. Then came the real signal of how serious this was. The board suspended the 2026 dividend. Companies this size don't stop paying shareholders lightly. They do it when the cash genuinely isn't there. On top of that, they authorized up to €5 billion in hybrid bonds, corporate speak for borrowing to keep the balance sheet from tipping over. Revenue landed at €153.5 billion, down 2%, and cash actually flowed out of the business to the tune of $4.5 billion. The worst loss in motor industry history, a canceled dividend, and fresh borrowing, all in 12 months. That isn't a rough patch. That's a company fighting to stay on its feet. Here's the important part. Vauxhall is one of those 14 brands, and it's not some minor name swept up along the way. Vauxhall Iron Works moved to Luton in 1905, and that town built cars through 2 world wars, rationing, the Blitz, and the 3-day week without switching off the lights. Nobody aspired to own a Vauxhall. It was the car you actually had, parked outside the school gates, handed to you the day you got the sales job. That's a different loyalty than advertising buys. The loyalty of being ordinary and always there, exactly what a spreadsheet can't measure. How Vauxhall became just another rebadged Peugeot. Think about what that factory gave Britain. The Cavalier, which for years simply was what a company car looked like. The Astra, which taught half the country to drive. The Corsa, and the Nova before it, the first car for an entire generation. The Viva, the Chevette, the Carlton, the Cresta. None of these were posters on a bedroom wall, and that was the point. They were the cars of ordinary British life built by British hands in a British town for British roads. Ask most men over 60 what their first car was, and a striking number will say Vauxhall, not the best, but the one they could afford. By the 1980s, Vauxhall had stopped being fully independent. General Motors had owned it since the 1920s, and most Vauxhalls were really rebadged Opels from Germany. But Luton kept building. The workforce stayed, the identity stayed, and a Vauxhall still felt like a Vauxhall even with German engineering underneath. Then in 2017, everything shifted. General Motors sold Vauxhall and Opel to the French group PSA, parent of Peugeot and Citroën, sold to the public as security and fresh investment. 4 years later, PSA merged with Fiat Chrysler, and Vauxhall became one of 14 brands inside something enormous. This is really where the story begins. January 2021, Stellantis is born from that merger, and within days it's one of the biggest car makers on the planet. Running it is Carlos Tavares, a Portuguese executive with a reputation for ruthlessness, the man who'd already dragged Peugeot back from the brink once by cutting costs harder than anyone believed possible. A new platform, the underlying skeleton a car is built on, costs billions before a single unit reaches a showroom. So why, Tavares reasoned, should 14 brands each engineer their own version of the same thing? Share the platforms, the engines, the parts. Cut the duplication out. For a while, it worked exactly as promised. Stellantis posted record margins. Profits ran ahead of every forecast. The industry press called Tavares the sharpest operator in the business, and rivals started asking why nobody else was doing this. The strategy had a tidy name, platform consolidation, but underneath it was one blunt instruction repeated across every brand. Find the cheaper part and fit it. On its own, each call is defensible. A supplier that saves 8 pounds, a shared wiring loom, a gearbox pulled from another brand's parts bin. None of those alone ruins a car. But nobody makes one of those decisions. They make $10,000 a year across 14 brands, and that's where the cracks start to show. Here's exactly what it did to Vauxhall. A Vauxhall and a Peugeot became, underneath the skin, the same car, same platform, same engine, same electronics, same switchgear. What separated them was the badge, the grille, and the price tag. Buyers didn't clock it consciously at first, but they felt it. Why pay more for a Vauxhall when the identical Peugeot next to it was 200 pounds cheaper? Vauxhall had spent 100 years earning its place as Britain's default choice. In under 5 years, it became interchangeable with 3 other brands. Strip everything distinctive out of a car, and you strip away the reason anyone chooses it. The self-destructing engine hidden in millions of cars. If you've ever owned a Vauxhall, an Astra, a Corsa, a Cavalier, a Viva, whatever it was, drop a number 1 in the comments right now. I want to see how many of us are watching this together. And if you haven't hit subscribe yet, it costs nothing, takes 2 seconds, and it's the only reason videos like this keep getting made. Now the part that actually affects your driveway today. When PSA needed a small petrol engine to fit across its entire lineup, it built one, a 3-cylinder, 1.2-liter unit called the PureTech. Light, cheap to produce, efficient on every metric the industry cared about. It picked up International Engine of the Year more than once, proof, on paper, that a small engine could do a big engine's job. Because Stellantis shares everything, that engine ended up everywhere. Peugeot, Citroën, DS, Vauxhall. Driving a Corsa, a Crossland, a Grandland, or an Astra from roughly the last decade with a 1.2 petrol badge, there's a real chance this exact engine sits under your bonnet right now. Here's what most owners never learn until it's too late. Most engines drive the camshaft with either a chain, which lasts, or a rubber belt mounted outside where you can see it and swap it out. The PureTech does neither. Its belt sits fully submerged inside the engine oil because a wet belt runs quieter and cuts friction, flattering the emissions figures on a test bench. In the real world, over years of short journeys in a cold country, that belt slowly breaks down, not a sudden snap, a slow decay. The rubber softens, sheds fragments into the oil, and those fragments travel until they hit the narrowest point in the system, the pickup that draws oil into the engine. It clogs. Once blocked, oil pressure collapses, bearings run dry, and an engine fine on Monday can be scrap metal by Friday. The cruel part is the timing. By the time the dashboard light comes on, the damage is done. Owners describe hearing a rattle, booking it in for the following week, and never driving that car again. The bill is brutal. A full engine replacement runs several £1,000s, more than a 5 or 6-year-old Corsa is worth. Owners are left with 2 options: scrap a perfectly good car, or pay a bill bigger than the car's own value. This isn't a handful of unlucky drivers. It's been widespread enough to trigger legal action in France, sustained coverage in the British motoring press, and thousands swapping the same story online. Stellantis has since extended warranty cover and quietly, in later versions, went back to a chain. Notice what that tells you. They changed it, which means they already knew. Put those two halves together and you get the real story. The wet belt wasn't a mistake. It was a design decision made to trim cost and flatter an emissions number. Exactly the kind of call the Tavares strategy was built to reward. Share everything across 14 brands, and when one shared part is brilliant, everyone benefits. When it's flawed, the flaw rides along with it, fitted into millions of cars before anyone notices. That's the real price of platform sharing. Not just a loss of character, but a single point of failure sitting in the sump of an enormous number of British cars. The billion-pound loss is the boardroom version of this story. The dead Corsa on a driveway in Luton is the version people actually live through. Why the Luton factory really had to close. Speaking of Luton, that brings us back to the factory itself. In late 2024, Stellantis confirmed it was shutting the plant for good, ending 120 years of production on a decision made an ocean away. Around 1,100 jobs were tied to that site. Some offered relocation to Ellesmere Port in Cheshire, now converted for electric vans. For most, moving 200 miles isn't a real offer, not with a family and a mortgage already built elsewhere. Luton isn't a wealthy town, and that plant wasn't simply an employer. It was the anchor holding up an entire local economy. The suppliers, the cafes, the trades, the ecosystem around a factory over a century. The reason Stellantis gave was the government's electric vehicle mandate, which forces manufacturers to hit a rising percentage of EV sales each year, or face penalties. Stellantis argued the targets were tougher than the market could bear, that British buyers weren't switching fast enough, and that petrol and diesel vans in Britain no longer worked. You can take that at face value, the pressure is real, but hold it against what the company was saying at the exact same time, and something doesn't add up. In that same window, Stellantis was writing off 22 billion euros because it had bet too aggressively on electric itself. Two contradicting stories, same company, same technology, within months of each other. The mandate almost certainly played a part, but there's a real difference between a policy making something harder and a policy making it impossible. And a company that's already admitted it badly misjudged the EV transition isn't the most reliable narrator of why a British factory really had to close. What isn't up for argument is the sequence. General Motors sold Vauxhall in 2017. PSA merged into Stellantis in 2021. Costs got stripped out across all 14 brands. Luton shut in 2025. In February 2026, the accounts revealed the worst loss the industry has ever recorded. 8 years, start to finish. British built to badge only. Tavares faced the reckoning first, forced out in December 2024. And here's the detail that shows how worried the board really was. He was pushed out over a year. The company still turned 5.5 billion euros in profit. They didn't remove him for losing money. They removed him because they could see what was coming. Antonio Filosa took over that summer, and his first job was to open the books honestly, which he did this February. The write-downs landed. The loss went public. The dividend disappeared. Filosa was direct. The company had overestimated how fast the energy transition would move and needed to reset around giving customers a real choice between petrol, hybrid, and electric, word for word the opposite of the strategy that got them here. Why the Luton factory really had to close. Vauxhall isn't the only one paying for it. Maserati sales have collapsed, and its electric future got scrapped. Alfa Romeo has spent years near the bottom of reliability surveys. Lancia's been shrunk to essentially one model. DS was invented from nothing as a premium French brand, and buyers never bought the story. Chrysler in America has been starved down to one aging model. 14 brands, centuries of combined history, all fed through the same machine, and the machine squeezed the cost out while the character went with it. Every badge survived. The reason to want one didn't. This isn't one company being uniquely reckless. Volkswagen ran the same playbook, shared platforms, and made the same enormous bet on electric, arriving faster than it did. It's bleeding now too. Even Porsche, the most profitable luxury car maker on the planet, made the identical call and watched its own profits fall away. The thinking was the same everywhere. Cut cost by sharing everything, push electric harder than buyers were asking for. Assume the badge alone would carry the loyalty regardless. Stellantis simply ran the experiment furthest, across 14 brands at once, and the bigger the empire, the further there is to fall. Efficiency, pushed to its logical end, turned out to be a very effective way of quietly destroying the exact things customers cared about. So practically, if there's a Vauxhall on your drive right now, what does this mean for you? First, resale value. A brand that shut its home factory and sits inside a group this deep in trouble doesn't hold money well. So if you're selling in the next year or two, factor that in. Keeping it until it dies? None of this changes anything for you. Second, parts and servicing. Genuinely good news here. Stellantis is enormous. These engines and platforms are fitted across millions of cars across Europe, so parts availability isn't a concern. The same sharing that hollowed out the brand also guarantees a wishbone for this car in 15 years' time. Third, and this is the one that actually matters, the engine. If you're running a 1.2 petrol from this family, don't panic, but don't ignore it either. Check your service history for when the belt was last changed, then check the current recommended interval rather than the original handbook. That guidance has since been revised. Change your oil more often than the book suggests. Short journeys and long gaps between services are exactly what kills these engines. Use the correct spec oil, not whatever's cheapest that week, and check whether your car still falls inside the extended warranty window. Plenty of owners have had repairs covered they assumed they'd pay for themselves. Hear a rattle from the front on a cold start? Stop driving it and get it looked at that same week. So, should you keep it? If it's been serviced properly and that belt's been done on schedule, honestly, yes. These aren't bad cars. They're cheap to run, cheap to insure, cheap to fix, and there are millions of them, which keeps the whole ecosystem around them affordable. What they're no longer is British in any meaningful sense. That ended the day Luton shut its gates. The badge still reads Vauxhall, same as it has since 1903. But what it represents now is a decision made in Amsterdam, financed in euros, paid for by a town in Bedfordshire that spent 120 years building cars and, from here on, simply doesn't. So, tell me honestly, what did you drive and what happened to it? A Cavalier that clocked 200,000 miles without a single complaint, or a Corsa that ate its own engine at 60,000? Drop the model, the year, and what went wrong in the comments. Between everyone watching this community has probably owned every single one of these cars, and your stories are a far more honest record of Vauxhall than anything this company will ever publish. And if you think a £20 billion loss is the worst thing happening in British cars right now, it isn't. There's a name in this country people don't just buy, they dream about it, and it's in far more trouble than this one ever was. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.